At the office, Greg keeps making drawings instead of working. He has an image in his head of a beautiful place and a pretty woman, and they both feel very real. Greg's interrupted by a call from his daughter Emily, who first asks how he's dealing with his shoulder injury. After Greg confirms he's been taking his medication, Emily asks him to come to dinner to celebrate her graduation. However, Greg's relationship with his ex-wife isn't good, and he's afraid he'll ruin the dinner. Instead, he offers to take Emily and her brother out the next day. Afterward, Greg calls the pharmacy to refill his prescription, but they tell him he's already exhausted all his refills. After taking his last medicine, Greg leaves for a meeting with his boss and doesn't see his wallet glitching on his desk. The boss Bjorn scolds Greg for spending all his time drawing and fires him. At first, Greg is in shock and doesn't know how to react, but when Bjorn touches his shoulder, he snaps and pushes him. Bjorn accidentally hits his head on the desk and instantly falls dead. A panicking Greg considers some options, but the bathroom is occupied and the emergency exit would trigger an alarm. He decides to hang the body on the window using the shirt sleeves and covers it with the curtain. When the secretary comes in, Greg tells her that Bjorn never showed up and leaves. At the bar, Greg asks for a strong drink and notices that Isabel is watching him. Suddenly, she starts making a strange hand gesture at him and announces that he's real because he isn't affected by her powers. Greg is confused by this, so Isabel waves her arm to make some objects fall from the waiter's tray. She then mentions that he needs an alibi and points at his office building, where the body can be seen in the window. Isabel says she's going to help him because she feels responsible since she created this world. But first, she needs Greg to get her necklace back from her ex-boyfriend. Since her ex is real, she can't use her powers on him. Greg doesn't understand, so Isabel explains that the people in the street and the bartender aren't real. She also knows Greg's name, even though he didn't introduce himself, claiming she took it from his mind. Greg goes to the bathroom and finds the ex passed out on the floor. He takes the necklace from his hand and brings it to Isabel, who tells him that it contains special yellow crystals with the power to manipulate the fake world. When she hears that the guy was unconscious, she sends Greg back to get his wallet too. Then they use the money to buy alcohol and put the crystals in it before drinking it. Now Isabel announces that Greg is free. They use the new power together and push Bjorn's body through the window, making it look like he self-deleted. Greg runs to join the terrified crowd, but Isabel drags him away to avoid suspicion. She tells him he needs to lie low, so she takes him to an electronics store to force him to sell his phone. Greg looks at a picture of his family for the last time before handing it over. On TV, they're already talking about Bjorn's death. Afterward, Isabel takes Greg to the encampment where she lives with a bunch of homeless people. However, she says she isn't homeless, she just wants to live off the grid. Since she has electricity and water, and he doesn't have many options, Greg agrees to hide there for a while. In the evening, they watch the news and learn that Bjorn's case has officially been closed as self-deletion, which means Greg is safe. He still feels guilty about the incident, so Isabel reminds him that Bjorn wasn't real. Since he's still unsure about that, she decides to teach him how to use his powers. She starts by putting a lighter in his hand and guides it to make him light some candles from afar. Greg does it successfully on his first try. Then, Isabel puts the candles out with a wave of her hand and takes the lighter back. Now Greg tries with his bare hand and manages to light the candles again. During dinner, Greg shows Isabel the drawings of the fancy house and the beautiful woman. She points out that it's her, which means he's been drawing their real life outside of this world and he's her guy. They end up sharing a kiss. The next morning, Emily goes to see her brother Arthur. She wants him to help her find Greg and convince him to come to her graduation. However, Arthur refuses, saying he can't trust Greg anymore. He reminds his sister that Greg always has an injury to use as an excuse to avoid things and implies he's addicted to medicine, causing Emily to get upset and leave. Meanwhile, Isabel and Greg go rollerblading and have fun knocking people over by using their powers, even the elderly. Greg is hesitant at first, but Isabel teaches him that nothing matters because it's not real. Once everyone is down, they kiss in the middle of the ring. In the bathroom, they take more yellow crystals and end up getting naughty in a stall. On their way out, they steal clothes from the coat stand. Outside, they watch themselves getting arrested. Suddenly, they're in the police cars, and the people in the stolen coats are just two hobos. At the police station, they get their pictures taken, but they refuse to tell the cops their names. Soon they're released, and they're still eager to have more fun. In the meantime, Emily is visiting all the local shelters to find her father. Moments later, Isabel asks Greg to wait for her at the restaurant. Then she goes to the corner, where he steals a client from the local working ladies. Greg wants to order while he waits, but he doesn't have enough money to pay, and Isabel is leaving in the client's car. At one of the tables, Arthur is hanging out with friends. He notices his father's terrible situation, but he doesn't approach him. Greg waits outside for a while, and an employee takes pity on him, so he gives him some expired food. At that moment, Isabel comes back, and they eat together. In the evening, Isabel visits Kendo to ask him to refill her necklace with yellow crystals. Greg waits outside and is approached by a dealer who tries to sell him some illegal substances. When Greg turns him down, the dealer shows him his rear as an insult. At the same time, Emily is searching the neighborhood because Arthur told him what he saw. Eventually, she finds Greg waiting for Isabel and tries to take him with her, worried about his current state of mind. Greg asks her to wait a little more and promises he'll go to her graduation, only for Emily to reveal she graduated 2 weeks ago. It seems Greg has lost track of time, but he still refuses to leave with his daughter. Defeated, Emily gives him her phone number and begs him to call her whenever he needs. After Emily leaves, Greg looks at the paper and realizes it's a picture of her graduation. Then Isabel comes back with more crystals and asks Greg to ignore Emily because she isn't real. As they walk away, another dealer begins following them in his van, threatening to shoot them for being in his neighborhood. Greg consumes too many crystals and uses his power to crush the van, only to then throw up. The next morning, Greg wakes up in Isabel's place. Since she isn't around, he picks up his things and leaves. On his way out, a hobo throws a beer can at him, and Greg starts drinking this early. He finds a payphone and tries calling Emily, but he only gets her voicemail. When he goes back to the encampment, Isabel freaks out because he left and claims she left a note. She also says that all the crystals were stolen. Isabel notices Emily's picture in Greg's pocket and cries because she thinks Greg is choosing a fake person over her. Greg swears he didn't see his daughter, and an argument ensues. As she freaks out again, Isabel reminds Greg that he's being seduced by a simulation and admits it feels like she's losing him. When Greg mentions they should stop hanging out, Isabel slaps him and claims that they're soulmates. Greg snaps, pointing out that he's seen no proof of her story. Desperate to make him stay, Isabel opens a safe and takes out some blue crystals that she got from Kendo. Supposedly, the blue crystals can kick them out of the simulation, although it's all theoretical. They need to take 10 each, and Isabel has less than that, but she thinks they can take the chance. Using a special device, Greg consumes the blue crystals and suddenly wakes up in a new place. Inside a mysterious room, Greg finds himself wearing fancy clothes and connected to a big machine that contains a bunch of brains. There are other people connected to the machine, including Isabel, who is also waking up and looking perfectly healthy. A worried technician checks on them while calling them doctors, so Isabel assures him they're fine, and they ejected the brain box on purpose. The technician helps Greg disconnect from the machine and gives him some Gatorade for rehydration. Noticing Greg's confusion, Isabel explains that in the simulation, only the volunteers connected to the machine are real. All the other people they saw were FGP, or fake generated person. Then the technician confirms that he was able to save their reincarnations in the cloud. When Greg looks at the computer, he notices that Emily is in the FGP category. Isabel brings Greg out of the research facility, and he discovers this is a utopic world full of advanced technology. Some people send out holograms instead of their real bodies, and Greg worries when another scientist shows to be wary of Isabel's research, but she swears it's fine. The couple goes for a walk to admire the beauty of this world, and Greg wonders why he doesn't remember any of this. Isabel assures him that memory loss is natural after being connected for a while, and his memories will come back soon. She points at a certain house, saying it's their home, and Greg realizes this is the landscape he's been drawing all along. While the couple spends a wonderful day together in this world, Emily desperately searches for her father in the other world to no avail. In the evening, Isabel worries because Greg's memory isn't back yet. She thinks it's her fault because she forced him to leave the simulation without the appropriate dosage. When she mentions that his memory may not come back, Greg says he doesn't care because he loves experiencing this place for the first time. He asks if it was always like this, so Isabel shares that this world used to be worse than the simulation because pollution killed people on the streets and poverty sank to a new level. 3 things helped make it better: synthetic biology, automation, and asteroid mining. Isabel then brings a machine called the Thought Visualizer, saying that he invented it. Anything you mention, the machine makes it appear on the screen instantly. With the illustrations from the visualizer, Isabel shares the story of this world. Synthetic biology fixed all the environmental problems, and the owner of the asteroid mining company made so much money that he gave lots of it away. Every person gets a base of $500,000 a year, while the robots do all the chores. People started to have time to spend on all their passions. However, they got used to it too soon, and their lives became dull. This is why Isabel invented the brain box. By letting people experience the bad, they learn to appreciate the good. Greg thinks it works because he's having a mind-blowing experience in this world. Isabel reminds him they need to go back to the lab, but he convinces her to give him one more day to enjoy himself. The next day, the couple goes sailing before attending a party, where they have lots of philosophical conversations with other scientists. In the evening, a doctor waits until Greg is alone to tell him that there are rumors of problems with Isabel's research. Greg assures him it's fine, but the man asks him to keep an eye on things because this could affect Isabel's reputation. After the guy leaves, Isabel comes to ask Greg what they talked about. Greg tries to pretend it was nothing, but Isabel snaps, accusing him of treating her like an idiot. She thinks nobody believes in her, and they're all laughing at her behind her back. To calm her down, Greg swears he does believe in her. The couple then leaves the party, unaware that an Emily hologram is looking at them. The technician warns her not to go near Greg because he's unpredictable. That night, Greg dreams of the simulation. The next morning, Isabel tells him that she wants to prove her experiment works, and for that she needs more data, so they should get back in the box. Greg doesn't want to go back and tells her to publish what she has, which is already enough. She only agrees to do it after he says yes to being interviewed during the presentation. That night in a packed theater, Isabel presents her experiment with the name Bliss. She explains true bliss can only be achieved by understanding the contrast with the opposite state of mind. Greg is called to the stage and Isabel asks him a few questions. After he tells the crowd how great he feels, Isabel plays a video of his answers before entering the simulation, showing him to be bitter and frustrated. When she asks him if he's lacking anyone in his life now, Greg hesitates before seeing a hologram of Emily among the public. However, he still answers no. Isabel concludes her research by saying that a once frustrated man is now full of wonder. At the after-party, all the scientists approach Isabel to compliment her research. Greg keeps seeing Emily's hologram around and decides to follow it, noticing that the ugly streets of the simulation appear around her while she walks. He asks her if she's really there, and she says yes before reminding him of his name and his children, claiming his head is not on straight. She's been to her tents and brought back the necklace with the yellow crystals. Emily shares an anecdote from her childhood, and Greg is happy to realize that he remembers it. His daughter asks him to choose between the two worlds. A few men argue as they try to get to Isabel, and they get aggressive, causing a guy to fall on a glass table. Then a bunch of protesters enter the building, causing total chaos. The noise makes Greg turn around, and Emily disappears. Seeing Isabel stuck in the crowd with no way to leave, Greg decides to take the yellow crystal and uses his power to push the people back. Afterward, the couple rushes out of the building, only to discover more chaos and riots outside, with lots of people getting violent. The holograms are showing the poverty from the simulation, so Isabel concludes that taking fewer blue crystals has caused them to come to the real world with the simulation still in their brains. They can only fix it by taking the right amount of blue crystals, but they don't exist in the real world. Their only choice is to connect again. The couple makes it to the lab, where power is failing, and the technician warns them it may be dangerous. Isabel ignores him and connects herself and Greg to the machine. Soon they wake up in the encampment, where it's raining heavily. They go to the bar to look for Kendo, and when the bartender tries to kick them out, Isabel uses her power to kill him. Then she approaches a group at the table and grabs a man's hair while demanding to know where Kendo is. Another guy takes out a knife, so Greg rushes to calm everyone down. While Isabel keeps on interrogating the group, Greg is shocked to see Bjorn outside. He runs to him and demands to know what really happened, so Bjorn gives him some change and calls security. Isabel has to drag Greg away and reminds him that Bjorn isn't real, he just was rebooted. Afterward, Isabel buys pepper spray from the working ladies and manages to get a client. When she enters the car, she uses the spray on his face, and Greg uses the chance to drag the guy out. The man tries to defend himself, but Greg brings him down with a punch. After stealing the man's wallet, the couple leaves in the car and finds a gun in the glove box. Moments later, they arrive at Kendo's place, and Isabel threatens to shoot him if he doesn't give them blue crystals. Kendo agrees to cooperate and reaches for his pocket, so Isabel shoots him down thinking he's going for his gun. However, he actually has crystals in his pocket. Isabel doesn't feel guilty because even though Kendo is real, this won't kill him in the real world. Greg freaks out, feeling like she's making up the rules as she goes along. Suddenly, the cops burst into the building, so Greg and Isabel rush upstairs to the roof. They manage to escape by taking the fire escape and reaching the stolen car. Meanwhile, Emily goes to find Arthur to ask for his help because the police has called her with the latest news. When the couple reaches the encampment, they get the device ready, only to discover that the blue crystals aren't enough again. While the police appear on the bridge, Isabel concludes that one of them must go back, and the other must be stuck there forever. Greg refuses to stay here, so she hands him the device. However, he doesn't dare to leave her behind. Instead, he proposes a plan. Isabel can kill him, so he'll wake up in the real world, and she can join him by using the device. Isabel refuses to do so and admits she isn't sure Kendo is alive because it's the first time death has happened. As the police surround the encampment, the siblings arrive. Arthur doesn't follow Emily though, explaining he only came to support her and not their dad. Isabel has a breakdown and blames herself since she created this world, so Greg tells her that it's beautiful and he isn't leaving. Emily runs to the bridge and calls Greg, only to be dragged away by the police. Then Isabel looks at Emily's graduation picture and calls her beautiful. She kisses Greg before stepping out to distract the police while she uses the device to take the crystals. Since the cops go after her, Greg manages to sneak away from the encampment and escapes without being seen. He cries as he crosses downtown, finally coming to terms with what happened. Moments later, Greg is sitting with a support group and admits he has an addiction. It turns out all the simulation stuff was a hallucination caused by the illegal substances that Isabel and Greg took. They've been nothing but violent hobos all along. Eventually, Greg is clean enough to meet Isabel again.